What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we're going to be talking about X-Men Red #2 by Al Ewing and Stefano Caselli. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down my predictions for what Abigail Brand's plan is regarding the scheme that she's working, manipulating Orchis and Krakoa against each other, and what her end game is exactly. And I'm also going to be breaking out how mutants like Storm and Manifold are already throwing a wrench in her plans, and why Vulcan is the last mutant on Arrako that she should be trusting with securing her victory. We're gonna talk about all this and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so last time we talked about X-Men Red, one of the things that came up was Vulcan's mysteriously disappearing into what was called the Fault, and how he never really truly died. He was apparently found by these alien entities out in the far reaches of space. He was recovered, and then he was genetically manipulated into becoming some kind of a sleeper agent for their future plans. This issue doubles down on that, revealing that Vulcan is practically ready to do the deed, that something is coming and he's going to be given a signal, and eventually he's going to act on these alien entities' behalf. More strange than that is we finally get the answer of what's going on with him and Petra and Sway. It was brought up in the previous issue by Cable that something had happened between him and Petra and Sway. Now, my initial thought was, did he kill them accidentally? Well, the answer is both yes and no. He did technically accidentally kill them at the Summers house, but they weren't real. Okay, so if you're sitting here scratching your head wondering, Petra and Sway, who were two of the X-Men sent alongside Vulcan, as well as other characters like Darwin, were sent out to Krakoa originally to save the X-Men who were trapped on that island. All of those mutants had been killed off with the exception of Vulcan, and well, technically Darwin, because he kind of piggybacked his essence onto Vulcan, but that's neither here nor there. Point of the matter is, once House of X had occurred and Krakoa was reborn into a new entity, we saw that Vulcan was on the island and that Petra and Sway were there. The thing I never really ever considered back then was Petra and Sway existed in a time before Charles Xavier had ever actually cemented Cerebro as we know it today. Their essences, their minds were never recorded. And honestly, none of those X-Men that went to Krakoa during the Deadly Genesis story arc, none of their minds were recorded. All of them existed pre-House of X Cerebro. The only reason characters like Darwin and Vulcan are around is, well, for one, Vulcan was alive. He was the only one left alive. And once again, as I said earlier, Darwin's essence piggybacked off of Vulcan. That's how Darwin was able to reconstitute himself. So those characters are accounted for. So the Petra and Sway that we have seen this entire time, they have never been real. Now, they are real to other people, and the reason why other people have actually been seen interacting with them is because they're energy constructs. They are created by Vulcan to be the Petra and Sway that he remembers. However, while they look like Petra and Sway and can interact with everyone else that they see around them, they also fuel his worst habits. For example, his excessive drinking, as well as other self-destructive behaviors. Now, saying how he did technically kill them, well, he does blow up the Summers house on the moon, not only with himself and Petra and Sway, energy constructs mind you, but also with Cyclops and Xavier in the building as well. Now, whether or not they actually died in this attack is another story altogether, but I think it's safe to assume he probably did kill them. I want to get away from Vulcan for a bit to talk about what's going on with Abigail Brand, because she gets a lot of business in this issue. Abigail's gambit to play both Orchis and Krakoa is not working out the way she hoped. Too many variables are fighting back against her, and more than one of them has figured out she's sus as f. Eden Fezzi, aka Manifold, already suspects she is the one who killed Gyrick. Not that anyone's shedding any tears about that particular part of it, but it does technically break the law of kill no man, and Gyrick, well, while he is a son of a bitch, he is still technically human, and he is protected under that law. And if it was revealed that Abigail Brand was the one that killed him, she would be going directly into the hole, and that would put a huge monkey wrench in her plans. Now, I don't know whether or not this is going to finally come to light, or if Manifold is going to find some kind of way to prove that this is what actually happened, because she does actually demand that he show proof of everything that he's claiming, but something tells me he's gonna end up figuring it out. He's gonna find a way to get the information that he wants, and honestly, I think WizKid is gonna be the best way for him to get it, even though WizKid himself is kind of bought on to what Abigail Brand is doing. Not 100%, because even WizKid doesn't know the full story of what's going on, but WizKid is working for Abigail Brand and seemingly trust her at least a little bit. Either way, Manifold has no reason to trust her, because as he points out, she was the reason why Sword Base fell out of the sky during the last couple of issues of Sword, and specifically was targeting his home country of Australia. This was a way to keep characters like Manifold out of the loop, because as Manifold points out, he technically was the only one who could have saved him if he actually did jump out of an airlock like she said, but since he was so busy trying to keep a sword base from crushing his home country, it just so happens that there was no one there to save Gyrick when he supposedly committed suicide. So Sword Base falling out of the sky was more than just a distraction for Gyrick, it was a distraction for Manifold as well. Now, Frenzy, while she doesn't necessarily have any feelings of distrust in Abigail Brand, at least nothing that, is vocalized, you can tell that those feelings are there. She doesn't want to be a part of this X-Men, this Quody Fingers X-Men debacle that Abigail is plotting, because she'd rather be doing the good work elsewhere on diplomatic missions. She knows this is wrong. She recognizes the Araki will never accept them as their saviors, because they are a society that doesn't want to be saved. But for now, Frenzy just kind of seems to be playing along. But now Abby has a new patsy, and that kind of brings us back to Vulcan, in a manner of speaking, playing on his weakened morals and his current weakened state of mind. She's using him in the way that the Avengers always used characters like the Hulk. They point him at something and just say, smash. And in this particular instance, the thing that she's pointing him at are something called the progenitors. Now, these are actual real threats, but these are not the real progenitors. Abigail has her Quody Fingers X-Men defend Arako against these progenitors as yet another distraction. They're not the real progenitors, but assets created by Orbis Stellaris, who in Sword number 10 said they needed a silent partner within the Sol system, and it looks like Abigail Brand is it, because Gyrick clearly didn't work out. These progenitors were what Abigail wanted to use to create a threat that the X-Men Red could take down and make it appear as though they saved the day. Not to be admired, but to make Arako hate the X-Men and Krakoa more for disrespecting their land's sacred ways of strength and self-sufficiency. This backfired terribly, because not only were the progenitors soundly defeated, but they were soundly defeated by the true heroes of Arako, the Brotherhood of Arako, led by Storm, who the Araki now revere as one of their own. This is huge, because initially, while people did like Storm, they didn't necessarily respect her as an Araki mutant, but Storm has turned all that around. She has now embraced the ways of the Araki, and while she does still embrace her old ways, she's realized that the old ways don't work here, and that rather than trying to make the Araki be the way she is, she's going to try and make herself more like them. And rather than being like those real world politicians who always try and tell you to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps when they themselves never actually did it themselves, Storm is going to lead by example. She has lifted her own self up by her own bootstraps, and she is going to try and show others to do the same, as well as lead by strength. Abigail even has to admit that she has underestimated Storm, because as she assumed, Storm would continue acting under the guise of the Queen of Wakanda, but instead all she found was the Queen of the Morlocks. Now, it's not to say that the Queen of Wakanda version of Storm is a weaker version of Storm, but this is a reference to the days when Storm was a far more fierce leader in not just look, but in action. When Storm became the Queen of Wakanda, it wasn't so much that she became, weaker. It wasn't that she so much became softer. It was just that she realized she had to act with an air of diplomacy. Whereas when Storm was the Queen of the Morlocks and back in the day, Storm was quicker to just do what needed doing rather than wait for someone to do it for her or to go along with whatever it is that she's suggesting. She led by strength and power, and that is what Abigail wasn't looking for. Abigail also does seem eerily interested, more interested than she was even before, in Cable's techno-organic virus, which she reveals she's already sent data analysis to Orcus about. It factors into their plans in some way, which makes a modicum of sense. It's something that can affect mutants on a high level, and Mora is around too. As we remember, she has reached out to Orcus, specifically Dr. Stasis, and she's seemingly working with or for the Phalanx. So from one techno-organic virus to another, it all seems to fit. Whatever is the case, Abigail has revealed she is intentionally pitting Orcus versus Krakoa for her own ends, and her aim seems to be getting the Araki to voluntarily leave Mars. She wants Mars for her own reasons, likely to use it as her own planetary level of sword as a defense for the Sol system and maybe even the universe as a whole. Defending the greater universe has always kind of been her thing. Even at the end of Al Ewing's Empire, that was her beef with Captain Marvel and the Avengers as a whole. It was that no one kept her in the loop when she was leading Alpha Flight, and that was during the whole, Kotati invasion. And now she promised in that, finale of Empire that she was going to build something better than Alpha Flight. She's yet to do that. Initially, I thought the new version of what she was trying to build was Sword. At least that's how she kind of made it seem, but that's not the case. Sword was never her endgame, and X-Men Red is just a smokescreen. Mars is definitely the next step towards her own version of universal defense. Why settle for a base when you can have a planet? She is going to try and take Mars from being the planet of mutants to being a sword planet. Sword on a planetary scale, and is at the center of the Sol system, already kind of anchored to be the spaceport of the Sol system, as was set up in Planeteside's X-Men #1. Pretty much Mars is ready to go. It has almost everything that she would need to make it everything that she wants it to be. Whatever that endgame ultimately materializes as, she's already planning to keep Vulcan around as a major part of her plan, maybe not realizing that he's already compromised. But until then, she plans on getting him on the Great Ring of Arako to oppose Storm, using his need to be recognized as Emperor against him and sending him to kill Tarn the Uncaring to earn his place on Arako's version of the Quiet Council. Now, getting away from that, there's something else Abigail Brand mentions that I did find interesting here, is that she brings up the Fourth Petal, which is a part of Orcus's little inner circle. That circle already includes characters like Alia Gregor, Dr. Stasis, Fei Long, Director Devo, as well as Abigail Brand herself, and she does mention the Fourth Petal and reveals that whoever it is, it's a Judas, a self-proclaimed Judas at that. This is the same one that monitors culture and narrative. We never get any kind of, direct idea of who this person's identity is, but whoever it is, Abigail knows who they are. And it kind of makes me wonder if this is hinting that whoever this Judas is, that's been mentioned on more than a few occasions, might actually be a mutant themselves, which isn't necessarily unusual since Abigail Brand herself is a member of Orcus's inner circle and is also a mutant. But who could it possibly be? Brimstone Love is a candidate. He is technically being treated as though he is a mutant in this iteration, unlike his X-Men 2099 variant. We also know that Mora, lately going simply by M, is a potential candidate, though I doubt she'd ever call herself a Judas, especially considering that she feels like she was the one who was betrayed. And she's a former mutant now anyway, so maybe it's not her. I feel like Mora, while she's working with Orcus, is working outside of Orcus as well. The other candidate I was thinking about is Lydia Nance, not a mutant by any stretch of the imagination, but is the leader of the Heritage Initiative, which is an anti-mutant organization, since she seems to be a recent convert to Orcus, but I doubt she's been let into the inner circle just yet. This issue does a lot of really interesting things. There is even some stuff going on with the character we were introduced to in the previous issue, the Fisher King, who we are now starting to realize might be more important than he may have let on. He kind of seemed to not really revel in his past, and he did reveal that though he does exist as an Araki, he doesn't have any superpowers. He doesn't have any mutant powers in the way that other people might imagine. Though he did say he had no mutant ability in X-Men Red #1, I think he might not realize that he has a mutant ability. As we see here in this issue, Every person on Arrako has some level of a mutant power, even if it's not a particularly useful one. We even see at one point Mentalo recognizes that one particular mutant, her only power was creating cubes of light that she could throw at people that didn't even really seem to hurt anyone. When she threw them at them, it's almost kind of like how when you think about My Hero Academia, how like 80% of the population has some kind of a quirk, even if that quirk isn't particularly useful. Kind of like how, Deku's mom, she can levitate things just a little bit. That's kind of the situation here, but something tells me the Fisher King, who is referred to as the unarmed king in this issue, which may be a reference to the fact that he isn't a mutant, maybe his power is something that's not necessarily tangible. Now granted, these are Araki people, so it doesn't really take much to motivate them to want to fight to protect their land, but something tells me he has some kind of a way to inspire people, because when he shows up, they immediately, all of the other Araki fall in line, and even one of them says, "I see the fisherman's mind." Now maybe this is because he's telepathic, or maybe it's because the Fisher King actually does have the power to make people see what it is that he wants them to see, that he wanted them to see how they needed to attack these progenitors, these quotey finger progenitors. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he actually does have a power. Who knows? I mean, maybe his power is inspiring others. I don't know. I mean, I've seen dumber mutant powers. But whatever the case is, the Fisher King has history on Arrako that is recognized by the small folk of Arrako. When I say small folk, I don't mean little people. I mean the people who are not in positions of power. They see Storm and they recognize her power, but they also recognize the Fisher King as well as being someone important. And right now, the Brotherhood of Arrako is doing the Lord's work, going out and saving the Araki mutants in the way that they want to be saved. Not by treating them as though they're helpless damsels in distress, but showing up to save the day in a way that inspires them to fight alongside them. This is the way that Storm and Sunspot and Magneto were talking about saving Arrako the Araki way. Creating a new Brotherhood of Mutants that is for the mutants, by the mutants. Not only that, the tremendous amount of respect that has been put on Storm's name in this issue, which once again, Al Ewing has been doing constantly, but I love the fact that when she shows up on the scene and Vulcan decides that he wants to puff his chest out and test nuts with Storm, Storm puts him on his ass almost immediately, even saying that, yeah, there's no difference between them in terms of raw power. They're both Omega level mutants. They both control primal energies. And while Vulcan is literally living fire, fire is still at the mercy of wind itself. And Storm puts him on his ass almost immediately. Not just even the whole snap freezing Vulcan when they showed up on site, but even just laying him on his ass later when he tries to get in her way after they've taken down the progenitors. I'm liking this new setup that Storm has going on. I'm liking this Brotherhood of Arrako that she's put together with Magneto and Sunspot, and I can't wait to see if they, what other characters get added onto this, because I'm pretty sure we're gonna wind up seeing Thunderbird at some point joining this team. I can't wait to see it if he does. And I honestly would be shocked if we see characters like Manifold and Frenzy eventually wind up defecting over as well. Now, don't forget there's also characters out there like Mentalo, Random, so on and so forth. Those characters are still out there in the wind. Of course, Mentalo and Random working with Abigail Brand's X-Men Red, but something tells me Mentalo has other designs as well, just based on some things that come up in this issue. We don't know exactly what those are yet, but I definitely can see him coming. But anyways, let me know what you guys thought about X-Men Red #2. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.